My favorite moment in this web was the alumni lecture series. Not because I was presenting, but because you can see your colleagues, you can see your friends, and you speak to the students, to the new graduate students, to motivate the new students that will become ambassadors of KAUST in the next couple of years.
It's out of the normal curriculum of the university. That's something that you usually don't have in many other universities.
It's a very unique time of the year in which the students can learn outside the classroom. They have the opportunity and privilege to meet speakers from all around the world.
After doing it for 10 years, KAUST has really perfected the WEP program. I must say that the impact of WEP was a huge impact in both my career and also my personal goals and achievements.
Hello, hello, hello. So today we have a treat for you guys. No pressure, Elsa. I mean, one of the best speakers we are going to be having this web series is going to be Elsa. She's going to tell us a lot about interesting things. So Elsa started her career, like many of us, doing her PhD in synthetic biology from Imperial College and University of Hong Kong. Then she took a detour being a VC. So she was investing money into startup companies, and then she took another detour to be a science fiction writer. So I mean, like, what does synthetic biology has to do with VC firms and investing money and then into science fiction? And I think from what I gathered reading her bio and looking at her work is that she is really passionate about biotechnology. She's really passionate about health. She's really passionate about improving the quality of life of people and looking into the future. She's looking into what's going to happen to humanity 50 years down the road. What do we look for research in order to improve our life? To maybe not only to compensate some of the problems that we might face or equip people with prostheses or certain type of devices that can help them with diseases, but actually to extend their capabilities. Now, some of this could end up being true. Some of them could end up being just fiction for now. But all of these are actually some interesting questions. Now, some people are going to start asking about, is this ethical? That's actually something that's good to know about. Some people will ask about, is this even feasible? That's something that you should ask about. But definitely, if you're going to ask about something today, you should ask her about her dark talent. I'm not going to reveal what's that dark talent, but that should be the first question or maybe one of the questions in the question and answer. With that, I leave the floor for Elsa. And I'd like also, I got reminded by Marie-Laure here that I should be thanking many of our visitors. We have visitors from all over the kingdom. We have visitors from different parts of the world, all participating in making this web experience a very good experience for everyone. This is one of the biggest events that happen at KAUST, and we're always welcoming to our visitors because they can share with our students their experience, their knowledge, and actually provide an environment where everyone could benefit from each other. With that, I'd love you to actually join me in thanking Elsa for agreeing to be with us today.
Thank you. Hello, good evening. Thank you all so much for joining. This is exciting, and thanks so much for the organizers, and Marie-Laure in particular for having me. Let me put my notes the correct way. So, there are two kinds of technologies. The loud ones we hear about all the time, AI, AR, VR, 5G, da-da-da-da-da. And then there are the silent ones that we don't hear about a lot, but we have to talk about it a lot more often. A lot of people would agree that the greatest innovations of the 20th century were powered by software and silicon, right? And they think it's just going to continue that way. But I beg to differ. I think the greatest innovations of the 21st century will be powered by living software. Genetic circuits, genome engineering, all of that. So let me ask you a question. Will digital biology reshape personalized medicine? Yes. Yes, it will. Thank you very much. Thanks, bye-bye. No, just kidding, just kidding. So before we start, I want to say I come from a small, so in case you're wondering, because of the accent, I get the question a lot, where are you from? So I come from a small country in the middle of Europe with lots of mountains, Switzerland. We're famous for cows and cheese and milk and chocolate and fondue and raclette, which is also cheese. So if you're vegan, but luckily I'm not. But I think you all know the most famous superstar Swiss person, right? He's little hint, he's still very relevant today, very agile with his mind and body, great with his hands. Shout out if you know it. Excellent. Roger Federer, exactly. No, Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein became a Swiss citizen in 1901, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of how that happened. And yes, shout out to Roger Federer as well, of course. But the reason I'm telling you this story is I want to share this beautiful quote of Einstein, a very Swiss citizen. So imagination is more important than the knowledge. Why? Because knowledge is limited, but imagination is endless. Imagination is the birth of evolution. So hopefully that provides a little bit of a teaser for what's about to come. So now let's step into a tiny urban home right next to the railway tracks in Switzerland. And there in the corner is a 7-year-old half-orphan girl reading science fiction. Stories of Jules Verne about tech and science, exploration and adventure. And her little family was struggling. So each time that the train would thunder by, she'd close her eyes and imagine that this were the roaring thrust of a spaceship lifting her family off to a better planet. And yes, this introverted nerd was me, and now flash forward 13 years more, when I was 20 years old, a science fiction novel literally changed my life. It was written by Michael Crichton. Who loves Jurassic Park? Yeah, lots of people. Awesome. Me too, me too. So this is not that book. The Andromeda strain is like Jurassic Park with a virus. And let's think about this for a minute, because I started wondering, not necessarily about the intricacies of the plot, but about the following. A virus, even though it's an ongoing debate, a virus is barely even alive, right? It's basically a piece of genetic code packed into a protein shell hardware. So I started wondering, maybe we don't need a spaceship to leave Earth forever, because actually we have a terrible track record of colonizing our own planet. So what if instead we could hack genetic software like a computer program and fix spaceship Earth instead? That's the question I became completely obsessed with, gonna admit it, completely obsessed. And a couple more years later in my studies, I got my answer somewhere surprising. At a workshop at the NASA Ames Research Center, I learned that actually we can genetically engineer microorganisms to produce medicines and create logic gates, and turn them into computers and enable long-term space exploration and make Earth more self-sustaining. So at that moment in my undergrad, when honestly I could barely tell the difference between running a gel electrophoresis and a PCR and centrifuging and mopping the floor, at that very moment, my dream turned from science fiction into reality. So let's take a look at how that works. In the early 70s, something remarkable happened. This thing came out, the Apple II. And for the first time, computers became personal. And it started out slowly and quietly first. And when I grew up in the 80s, we had then there came the little Tamagotchis, so these digital pets that would die on you all the time. And we had crappy analog dial-up internet, so you could be on the phone or on the internet. It's traumatizing. Not really, but little did we know back then that soon we'd be able to order pizza with emojis on Twitter and we'd all be brain hacked. Boom. Digital revolution, right? And the best time is right now because it's as exciting in synthetic biology now as it was in the computer industry at that very moment. So what does it mean for us, for our lives, for personalized medicine, if the bioreactor and the biolab are becoming increasingly democratized, digitized, and distributed? Well, welcome to what I like to call the synthetic age. It's an era where artists can recreate the faces of complete strangers from nothing but DNA samples found in the street. You might want to check if your face is hanging out there. And this technology, DNA phenotyping, is used in forensic and was actually used by police in the US and Louisiana to catch a serial killer, right? You can literally create a face from just a sample of genetic code. Or imagine little wearable biofactories that could power your phone as you walk. Or AI algorithms designing chairs inspired by your bone structures. It's astounding stuff. But what I find the most astounding is this stuff is accelerating exponentially fast. If you don't believe me, let me show you how we went from the very first genome sequencer, like this, to a handheld sequencer, like this. Looks almost like a smartphone, right? And this isn't just usable in, extreme environments like Antarctica and a desert, but in space. We can use it in space. So it cost $2.7 billion and took almost 15 years to sequence the first full human genome. 3.2 billion base pairs. And now we can do it for $1,000 in less than 2 days. It's 3 times faster than Moore's law. So we've broken these alchemizing tools of creation out from behind the walls of big institutions and gave them into the hands of everybody. And that's just a Moore's law. So, and one day I got a phone call from a huge global tech company, and I was like, what? You're calling me? Because they wanted to transition to digital biology. They wanted to harness this revolution. So I can't give away the details, but it was a little dream come true because I literally got to think about how to make cyberpunk science fiction real. How could we embed bionic systems onto consumer electronics? How could we rethink how we make stuff and fabricate computers? What if we could grow them? That's the revolution that's happening. The next generation of products won't be manufactured, but grown. And I hope you're hungry because I'm going to show you some stuff we can make, like chicken-free chicken, and egg-free egg whites, and shrimp-free shrimp, and seafood-free seafood, anything you can imagine, cow-free cow milk. And we can probably kiss water bottles goodbye in this decade because we can just take algae and turn them into these water blobs. We can turn algae into running shoes, taking a while. And this is the mushroom. It's one of my favorite things. It's a little lamp you can grow yourself from mushroom, the mycelia, the roots of mushroom, very robust, lightweight material. What about our health? The same thing is happening. So in some of the fund I worked at, we have an amazing buzzing portfolio, and some of these founders, they are producing protein molecules that enhance the uptake of cancer drugs in a specific way or accelerate cancer liquid biopsies from a couple days to, they say, 2 hours or 3 hours, which would be fantastic. And they're creating neurons on a petri dish to give drones a sense of smell to detect explosives. It's astounding stuff. And remember this image. These are streptomyces. They're bacteria that live in the soil. And this is Jake and Dakota. They are here working in their startup in the accelerator lab that I ran, although these guys came before my time, so I talked to them for an article, and I thought that was really fascinating. We've had really good antibiotics ever since Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, and most of the good and effective antibiotics, we've discovered them in the mid-20th century. And now, as you know, we are entering the post-antibiotic era. There was literally, in 2014, the World Health Organization declared an antibiotic emergency. It's the biggest public health threat, and is estimated to claim 10 million lives by 2050. You could die from the simplest wound, the simplest infection. So what Jake and Dakota figured out, hey, so in tech, we mine cryptocurrencies, right? So why don't we in biotech mine microbes? And that's what you can see here. So they're creating microbe mining kits to crowdsource a treasure hunt for antibiotics in people's backyard. So they send out these kits if people want them, and when they get them back, they will sequence the samples and track down the silent operants that are switched off in the absence of soil stimuli. Then in the second step, they launch a firework of chemical inducers to switch them back on. Does this work? Yes. So they identified chemical inducers that turn this little, not so interesting looking dirt microbe into a powerful living pharmacy of novel, potentially life-saving antibiotics. So over 90% of biosynthesis genes are trapped in silent operants. So if we can take advantage of the technology surrounding us to switch them back on and use bioinformatics to track down resistance genes, maybe we have a fighting chance. At the same time, it's never been a better time to innovate. It's never been a better time to start a company. And so one day I was at an industry event for venture capitalists. So as you can imagine, lots of women, lots of young people, people from all over the world, not. And a couple of meters away from me, there was a hugely famous tech investor. And so he looked over at me and started walking towards me, and I was like, my heart chambers were palpitating, my palms were sweaty. I was wondering, what should I talk to him about? What food do you like? What milk do you drink? Is it almond milk or oat milk? So he came over to me and I said, hey, so we have this incredible portfolio company, very strong market, very strong prototype. I would love for you to meet the team. And he interrupted me and he said, hey, I was looking for you. And I was like, me? And he said, yeah, I want to order another one of these, please. So I learned two things that evening. First, you can't wear a white blouse and a black blazer at an event like this if you're a young woman, because then people think you're a waitress. Not that there's anything wrong. Nothing wrong with that. Just saying, just saying. But the other thing I learned was that tech investors are incredibly excited about life sciences. And there's a good reason for that. And the key word is intersections, right? So medicine is no longer just medicine. It's hardware, it's software, it's data processing and analysis, it's data management. And we see the same in startups. So, and that's the same reason all these huge tech companies today are moving into health. Why? They have the user base, they have the consumer devices, they have data, everything's in place, and all they have to do is plug in digital health systems to create an entirely embedded, personalized health ecosystem. So it's never been a better time to innovate. We can accelerate research, we can de-risk research, and have this huge impact. There's only one problem. Innovation can't save us anymore. Innovation alone can't save us anymore. because we are sleepwalking right into the 6th mass extinction. We've eradicated over 60% of all species. How does that make you feel? Frustrated, angry, disappointed? Hopeful about change? I don't know, it makes me feel angry. And so at the end of all these collapsing ecosystems are we, right? And climate change isn't the only reason we should be worried about that, but actually, when we look at the permafrost region, it's a massive region that covers 24% of the entire northern hemisphere of the globe. Not only has this locked up something like, I think, 14.3 trillion tons of CO2, so it's a slow time bomb, but also ancient, up to 100 million years old, parasitic worms and crawly things and viruses and bacteria that our immune systems are not trained for. So we're living in really, really interesting times where we have a great responsibility. And that's why personalized medicine needs a trip to the moon. I'm just going to grab some water here. Excuse me. So, if we all know this story. Okay, that was not a good idea with the water. So we all know this story, right? I think in May, 25th May, 1961, the then US President JFK set the national agenda to put humans on the moon and bring them back safely to Earth. And 8 years later, you all know how the story ends. We did. 1960, 69, I think, July, they landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong took his famous giant leap for mankind. 650 million people watched his televised image and listened to his every word. And we all know that. But what I want to look at is the middle of that story. How did we make something like this happen? A giant feast of engineering, the greatest engineering effort in the history of the nation, involving 400,000 people and landing people on the moon in only 8 years. To understand this kind of thinking, we have to understand a brief history of the future of space travel and personalized medicine. Because moonshot thinking isn't a new thing. It's not a modern thing, even if we have fancy words to describe it. But it's literally as ancient as humans, as ancient Egypt. So this is a depiction of Ra carrying the sun across the sky in a mechanical boat. Does this seem very realistic today? Maybe not. What about the ebony horse in 1001 Night, a mechanical horse capable of space travel? Does this look very realistic? Probably not. What about this one? In the mid-19th century, this kind of looks closer to what we have. So imagine this story. There's a giant moon gun called Columbiad that launches a 3-crew spacecraft into orbit from a launch site in Florida to land on the moon and bring the astronauts back safely to Earth via splashdown in the Pacific Ocean at an estimated cost of $2.1 billion today, the equivalent. And I'm mentioning this one because Jules Verne, who wrote From the Earth to the Moon, is literally credited with inventing NASA. I'm not sure I agree, but with literally every interview you read with crew and astronauts and people involved, not just the Apollo 11 program, but just everything, it all comes back to this book. Now, we can understand what happened in the middle. And sometimes I don't always like to talk about warm, fuzzy words like inspiration. science fiction, because as scientists, we want to put numbers and stats and a value on something. But if we look at what happened, maybe we can. So the actual moonshot that happened, that we witnessed, was a gigantic Saturn V rocket, 3-stage rocket, 111 meters high. That's like 36 stories high. It's a decent-sized skyscraper that was inspired in shape and size from the moon gun that you just saw, launches a 3-crew spacecraft named Columbia into space from a launch site in Florida, Kennedy Space Center, Fort Lauderdale, into space where it lands on the moon and returns back safely to Earth via splashdown in the Pacific Ocean for a total cost of $14.4 billion. Does this seem familiar? That's why we need science fiction. Because science fiction's job isn't to predict gadgets and the future, but it's to inspire us, it's to foster dialogue. And so a concept I want to introduce you to for personalized medicine is moonshot thinking. And it sounds like a very theoretical, weird thing, I know, but it just means a radical, I admit that, radical shift of perspective. So instead of pursuing 10% incremental innovation, why don't you pursue tenfold improvement? Because innovation can no longer save us. We need disruption. We need disruptive innovation, and that's the 10%, the tenfold space. And the surprising thing I found is disruption is actually easier than innovation. It's easier than innovation because when you innovate, so you create the 10% improvement, you're doing the exact same thing as everyone else. That means you're locking yourself into a smartness competition, a productivity competition, a resource competition. So to create a small innovation, it costs you 100 times as much. But when you're breaking out of the mold, reshaping your perspective, then you can achieve a tenfold disruption that is worth 100 times more, but it's not 100 times harder. It's not 100 times harder. And the risk is if you don't pursue disruption, you might be fine for a while, I admit that, but eventually you'll get disrupted by those who do. So how can you apply this? It's actually pretty simple. Just don't say, that's ridiculous, that's science fiction, impossible. Ask, what are the specs? It's called science fiction prototyping. It's the same reason that we are now surrounded by all these very convenient innovations. So the reason we have, let me put it in another way. So when the movie Minority Report came out, it inspired directly over 100 patents. And so in Minority Report, you had something called gesture-based computing, right? Zoom in, swipe, does this look familiar? And the reason we have an iPhone with gesture-based computing is that one of the chief user interface designers of Apple saw that movie, and he didn't say, ridiculous, science fiction, impossible, silly. No. He said, hey, that's actually pretty cool. What does it take to make it happen? What are the specs? And it's the same reason we have the Nintendo Wii and the Microsoft Kinect, is it like all these video games. And then the rest of the stuff can be blamed on the Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy, to the Galaxy and Star Trek. So that's the value science fiction has. And we can take this exact same concept and apply it to medicine. Because the biggest companies of the world, companies like Nike, Boeing, General Mills, PepsiCo, Intel, they have something in common. Science fiction prototyping. And it's the same reason China uses science fiction to spur innovation. China is home to 80 million science fiction fans. What do you think that does to a nation? It can change the destiny of a nation, like we saw with the Moonshot. Same reason that these companies hire science fiction writers to imagine future business scenarios, to understand the needs of their future consumer. So how can we apply this to medicine? I have to skip ahead on this one, but the X Prize Foundation thought, we have this huge market gap and this huge humanitarian and public health problem that over half of the world's population still don't have access to essential healthcare, let alone modern medicine. So what would it take? What are the specs to make Star Trek's tricorder real? If you're not familiar, it's a little handheld device. So X Prize Foundation thought, yeah, we're going to put a number on that. Handheld device means 5 pounds, lightweight. It can monitor a couple of vital signs. So X Prize Foundation said, monitor 5 vital signs and instantly diagnose any disease. Sure, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but the X Prize Foundation said instantly diagnose I think 4 or 5 different 13 different disease states. And an important thing is it needs to be operable by anyone, not just medical doctors. Kind of sounds impossible, right? But when you put it into technical specs, maybe it's not so impossible anymore. And there was a winner, and that's what you can see here. So this shoebox-sized kit is called the Dexter, and there was a brother team. One was an emergency room doctor, the other was a software engineer who came up with it. So it's a shoebox-sized kit containing, it's full packed with image recognition software, pattern recognition software. It has finger pricks and patches and anything you can imagine. It has a walkthrough menu with, it's voice controlled on the iPad, and they want to bring it to the world for $200. And they're currently testing and preparing for FDA approval. So this is just one example. And what I want to show you is the lines are blurring, right? We had in the movie Elysium, not depicted here, you had this huge exoskeleton that the protagonist was wearing. And this is so common today. Panasonic has developed exoskeleton for factory workers, for the elderly. It's real. Or you had the Alien franchise, the movies, and Prometheus, the prequel, where you had, I don't know if you saw it or you remember it, but there was this surgery bot, right? Really scary, and I think the scene was not an optimistic one. But you walk in, it diagnoses you, and it automatically performs the surgery you need. And the Da Vinci medical robots make exactly this science fiction dream come true. So through automation, hospitals can curb the costs of surgeries and make this more accessible to everyone. We could in the future have a Netflix model for hospitals. And one of my favorite examples, I feel I owe you this, Jurassic Park. So many genetic engineers and actual paleontologists were shocked when it came out. They were terrified. They thought, hey, this is horrible. It has monsters in it that kill people. And they were terrified that this was going to erode their research funding alongside the public trust. But the opposite happened. Jurassic Park ushered in a new era, a new golden era of paleontology. The freshmen we have in this field today, these are the kids that grew up reading, watching Jurassic Park. And there was a study where they surveyed a whole bunch of freshman students around the world about what their biggest inspiration was for entering paleontology. And they said Jurassic Park came up on top every single time. And one student explained it because before this came out, it was just a weird, geeky thing to find dinosaurs cool. As, you know, an adult. Of course as a kid, but as an adult. And that's what Jurassic Park changed. It made weird dinosaur bones go mainstream. So the frontiers, not just between science and science fiction, are blurring, but also between humans and technology. So Apple, for instance, is developing an implant, a cochlear implant, that lets users take phone calls directly in their inner ear. And I know some pretty crazy biohackers in California. They are talking about an electronic implant in their leg that lets them stream movies. It sounds pretty wild, right? And we're very familiar with cyborgs from movies. I think we had Cyborgs Are Among Us yesterday, in case you were there as well. And the thing is, we will soon all be cyborgs. We will all be cyborgs. And if you think it's science fiction, I have a little movie that proves to you otherwise. So I became a cyborg live on stage a couple years ago, and I have a near-field communication chip implant right here, my left hand. And I think I don't want to spoil too much. I'm just going to say this. If you're squeamish, you don't like blood and gory things, please look away now. Ready?
Patrick Kramer of Diggiwell and Elsa Soteriadis of Pioneers will be very brave now. So welcome on the stage, please, Patrick and Elsa.
The brave volunteers.
Welcome on stage and give me a high five as well. Thank you very much. And hello, Patrick. So,
what we are going to do here is a live chip implantation on stage. And we have a wonderful volunteer, Elsa, here. And I'm going to do the procedure now.
an applaud for the brave
A big
volunteer.
hand of applause for Elsa.
Really brave, actually. I think it's amazingly brave. And girl, that's amazing. And
Is
I think we're done. Elsa, you've just turned into a cyborg. Holy shit. Holy shit. What's gonna happen?
So, ladies and gentlemen, or should I say, dear humans, thank you for that. And I'll hold this a bit into the camera. Still at Pioneers. Okay, something happens.
Something happened.
It's now success already. Did something happen on Twitter of
We're just
Pioneers?
checking.
This would now be the other phone here.
Okay.
It worked?
Yes, it bloody worked. It bloody
worked.
This is what you
Yes,
wanted, isn't it?
this is what I wanted.
So your hand just tweeted.
My hand just tweeted.
Holy fuck.
I am so sorry for all the cursing. I hope that's not too offensive. This is the tweet. Little spoiler, when we enter the Q&A after the keynote, I got a little demo for you. So, the future is now, right? This stuff is not futuristic. It's happening right now, right here, everywhere, all around us. And so, why did I do that? I get that question all the time. So, because we're surrounded by technology that is accelerating exponentially fast, we got a choice to make. We can take the future that is issued to us, that is sold to us, or we can become the creators, the builders, the makers, and create our own future. So my mission is to literally push innovation into the hands of everybody, literally and metaphorically. And usually, in science and tech circles, and generally speaking, people are very, they love stuff like that because they're early adopters. But what about the rest? So from some really one day when I was checking my socials, I saw a massive spike from Greek people on YouTube and Facebook. And so just to give you the background so that it makes sense. So I'm Swiss, but born in Germany, and my father is Greek. And so I noticed, hey, I have trolls. I have actual trolls. So this video that you just saw, this got trolled in Greek, but their school translate. And they were saying horrible things, saying, racist things like, she's not a real Greek, and I got death threats. People wanted me to die for this. And to each their own, but we need to talk about science and innovation. We cannot continue in an anti-scientific world. It's dangerous. It literally kills people. There are still 1.5 million children dying every single year from medieval diseases that are entirely preventable through vaccination. But some parents still refuse to vaccinate their kids. And I think there's a reason humans started to walk on two legs and invented fire and language, because we need to use tools. We need to create stuff and build stuff. So if you're anti-science, today, I don't understand it. It makes me feel disappointed, because how can you enjoy basic things like sweet, savory fruits if you're opposed to selective breeding technologies and genetic engineering? How do they think their labradoodle was made? It's the same logic. It's the same logic. So I think it's the next natural stepping stone for us to shrink all this technology that surrounds us, because it's getting closer and closer to the body and into the body. That's why this tech company came to me, because they want us to be part of a health IoT. And I get how that can be really scary. So I think there's a line, and it's a difficult line to track down, but I think there's a line between alleviating suffering and human enhancement and becoming superhuman. And I'm going to get a little bit more into this discussion, because it opens a Pandora's box of ethical questions. So the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And there's another reason we need science fiction. Our thinking is linear, but all this tech that you just saw is accelerating exponentially fast. So we tend to underestimate how much we can achieve in a decade. And we need to make sure that we're prepared. And that's why I started writing science fiction. Because narrative is powerful. It's the most powerful, mind-expanding tool that we have at our disposal. So we need to nurture these very human qualities to make sure we're not building a dystopia. So we are hardwired for narrative. We're story creatures, and narrative is an empathy generator. So let's use this to understand the kind of future that we're building. We are soon entering a world where your smart fridge could lock you out because your health insurance thinks you need to go on a diet. On the upside, you could get a gene modification appointment down at your local genetic spa that solves all your weight problems instantly overnight, because we could be leasing superpowers instead of supercars. Even our offspring could be lucky. #blessed. So you could have a whole app store of the genome of your unborn child, where you select a couple of genetically encoded traits, apply some filters, and then sit back and relax to watch the avatars of your child grow up. And then you pick one. After that, all you'd have to do is download the blueprint of your perfect designer baby into the incubation chamber in your living room, and boom, your product, I mean your child, is ready. Ready for a brave new world. How can we ensure that there is a line between a child and a product? Designer babies are not futuristic. They're already here. The scary thing is, I came across multiple companies with that exact business model. They're working on prototypes, they're looking for funding, or they're already entering the market. On the upside, some of us would still be making babies the traditional way, if you know what I mean. But how far would you go to save your one child, the pride of your family, from a debilitating genetic disease with a one-off $1 million gene therapy? How far would you go to give it the one trait to succeed? How far to make your family virus-proof for life? Or would you rather make grandma cancer-proof? I appreciate this is still a bit in the future, but this is the future we're building. We are building a genetic supermarket where certain people can go shopping. So what does that mean for the rest of us? At the same time, what good is it to live forever if the world around us is dying? What good is it to live forever if we can implant fake memories into a rat, but we can't recover the lost memories of a loved one? Biotech could even change our relationship with death. This is the death mask. It contains pigment-producing bacteria that are spatially mapped from algorithms after breathing patterns to encapsulate the last breath of a loved one. Grief is hard, right? That's why Barbara Streisand cloned her dog twice. I swear I'm not stalking her dog. I explained it to Interpol 10 times. Grief is hard. And all these human experiences, where are they? They live in the brain, right? They're all in the brain. And so I think part of medicine is really looking at something that's as personal as a fingerprint, which is the human brain. And the next generation of wearables that we have today, they could be brain implants, right? Half of Silicon Valley is obsessed with hooking up the human brain to the internet. What does that mean? So we could soon have an AI assistant living in our brain that lets us dial a mood, like the mood organ in the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It wasn't in a Blade Runner movie. Again, this sounds like science fiction, but it's already reality. AI-powered brain implants, so deep brain stimulation with electrodes, have already been tested in people. So it treats cases like epilepsy, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. So this AI assistant could monitor your emotions, deep learn everything about you, maybe share it with Facebook. They're getting into personal predictive medicine to craft the perfect mute button for your personality. Because what really makes you, you? What makes us human? It's this crazy, hard to understand, very unique firework of brain activity and neural patterns, right? It's an impossible dream flickering up somewhere between your brainstem and your frontal cortex. It's a precious memory sipping through the web of your neurons. It's empathy, love, curiosity, human ingenuity. But it's also fear, anger, rage, hatred, grief. And that's why an AI could kill your humanity out of kindness. In summary, we've seen why or how biology became an information technology, how it's reshaping our understanding of health and our relationship with love death, and our own evolution. So we have these powerful, democratized tools that we now have access to, and the promise is maybe we could use something like genome editing to make the approximately 6,000 known genetic diseases that are fatal or at the very least completely debilitating, to make these things something of the past. On the other hand, what if we're building a world where only some people get sick and some don't? So I want to leave you with this. We are living in the most important decade to harness our imagination for the Earthshot of the century. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Elsa, for this interesting talk. And now it's time for questions and practicing our throwing skills here.
And if you agree, I have a little demo for you. Are you okay for me to go ahead? Okay. So, to manage expectations first, in the video that you saw, I auto-posted to Twitter directly. So Twitter changed this kind of stuff to prevent bots or robots or cyborgs from auto-tweeting things. So I'm going to still need to launch the tweet, but if you want, I can show you how to tweet just by hand swipe. So I'm told to look at this camera. So this is the phone. Remember, the chip is right here in my hand. And it's based on near-field communication, which means I need to actually find the chip to trigger the command. And I need to open the phone. So let's see. So it may take me a couple seconds to find the NFC chip on the phone. That's actually the hardest part. So if you have Apple Pay, which is the exact same technology, that's a lot easier. But because there's skin and tissue, I have to kind of probe it a little bit. Yeah. So this now opens Twitter. It composes a tweet, and I'm so sorry, I still have to press tweet, because Twitter is gonna just block me otherwise. And if you go on Twitter, @TheBiofuturist, so go to Twitter @TheBiofuturist, you should be able to see the tweet. And I'm gonna see if I can open my own Twitter real quick to show you how the tweet looks like. So if you go to Twitter @TheBiofuturist, you will find the tweet. Yes, there we go. It's there. And I'm gonna hold it into the camera so people on the live stream and the video have it later on. So this is how you tweet by hand swipe. And thank you so much. And I'm very happy to receive all your questions.
Questions? Okay. This is going to be too far, so we're going to do two flows here. So come here.
There we go, now we got two. So you described a world where you're encouraging us to, if we can think it, we can make it.
Sorry, where are you? Can you? Oh, okay, hi.
So you're describing a world where you're encouraging us to create what we can think of. That science fiction is now the driving force of a world where our imagination should be the leading force to creation. Where do you see the boundaries of this? So you seem to encourage us of think as far as we can go, but do you think there is something that we can think that we should, however, not pursue?
Yeah, really, really big question, an excellent question. I think so. So the world I want to believe in, because I'm a techno-optimist, is that we can uplift all of humanity with science and technology. And we all know the truth is a little bit different. Some of us who can afford it and have access, we can have sophisticated sleep trackers like this ring, or wearables, or ridiculously overpriced gadgets. And I think something similar will happen if we start looking at genome editing and all these new tools of creation. So as soon as something becomes a product rather than a basic right, then only that creates inequality. And something I'm personally really concerned about is the question, are we engineering inequality into our genomes? So I think there needs to be a line. So I'm all for, creating these products. I mean, I have a background in venture capital, so I'm not going to say, no, don't create companies, don't sell anything, don't buy anything. No, of course not. But there needs to be a ethical consideration, because I think as soon as you can inherit or, pass on changes you made, I think that starts to literally mess around with the source code of the human species. So for me personally, that's kind of where the line is. So there's a biohack, actually, like lots of the do-it-yourself kind of biohackers. It's kind of the latest fad to inject yourself with CRISPR stuff to make your muscles grow or make a really good show for the public. And yeah, I don't know. I think, I don't mind that. I don't mind, obviously, people getting augments or implants. I think if you can implant electrodes in someone's spine or brain to help them walk again and alleviate suffering, that's tremendous. And we have to do it. We have a moral obligation to do it. But what about creating someone who with superhuman speed? Does that limit the boundary? I think, for me, I don't mind that personally. If it's fun, if they can afford it, if they want to do it, I don't know, to each their own, why not? But if they can pass on superhuman speed to their offspring over time, what happens? You bifurcate the human species. So I think that's where it gets problematic.
Hello. Thanks for your speech. I really enjoyed it. I've got one question about the chip that you've got in the hand. Like, I've heard that, about some people that already use this option to implant a chip. I've heard about one guy that was able to pay with hand, and
Yep.
that it looks quite funny. So I would like to ask whether it is possible to have the programmable chip in your hand, so you could choose what kind of information does it send and so on. I can imagine then, let's say you are in the hotel, and if they've got chip doors, they can somehow just modify your chip and so on, so you can open here with your hand and so.
Yes, that's actually the perfect use case. So there are now thousands, I think more than 10,000 cyborgs in Sweden, which in Europe is some kind of the cyborg, I don't want to say, Sweden has lots of cyborgs, and the number one thing they do is pay for public transport and open doors to the office and open doors to the gym, or open their own door at home. Sometimes I stay in Amsterdam with my best friend, and she has a door where you can just enter with your phone or a wristband. And if we would reprogram the chip and they have a compatible NFC standard, then I could just swipe myself in by hand. And you mentioned payments. Yes, I am slightly jealous of that, because I think that's a really cool use case. And I think right now, I think it's a fun thing to play with, swiping in at work or play or fitness or gym. I think that's great. But what if we can turn these chips into payment systems and credit card? I think that's where it gets really interesting, and that's where this could really go mainstream. And to answer your other question, yes, you can reprogram the chip. It has a memory of 886 bytes. The antenna is 13.6 megahertz, so it's really low frequency, which is why you need to awkwardly go really, really close. And in fact, you can, so when you check into a hotel, they will usually program your room card on a card reader or a card writer. And in theory, you could do the exact same thing with your hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have one question regarding the chip you have in your hand. I didn't understood if you can actually type with the chip, or do you, if you have like to type before the tweet and then you just send it with the chip?
Yes, so I'm going to give you what I did, and I'm going to give you the version of what I want to do. So what I did the function of the chip was to pre-compose a tweet, right? So when I put it against the Android phone, it came up with this tweet, went to the internet. I still had to press send. And how you can set it up is I don't really want to advertise it, but there's a thing you can use to pre-write a tweet, and then it gives you a link. So it's kind of a link shortener. It's a short link. Doesn't take a lot of space either. And then you put that link on your NFC Write app. So it's an Android app. And then you copy paste the link onto the app, and then you write that link onto the chip, and then, provided you have strong Wi-Fi connection, so I'm very grateful that we did, it then launches that tweet. But I still have to actually press send because Twitter changed a couple of rules. And so, and the different version of what we did for the live demo was with the tablet, because you get a couple of apps that are actually a little bit more advanced. And what you can do is, and I tried this and it worked once, but then not again, because Twitter doesn't want you to post duplicate tweets, so it's complicated. But you can, there's a web integration called Zapier. They're basically APIs. So that means your different devices and your hand starts talking to different parts of the interweb and the devices surrounding us. So you can pre-program the tweet. When your NFC chip launches the link, the Zapier integration will query that link. So we'll constantly check, did someone trigger the link, someone trigger the link, someone trigger the link, and then when it gets triggered, the Zapier from the desktop or server will then auto-post the tweet. So that's actually more elegant. And I tried to set it up, it worked once, but then you have to change the tweet every single time because, again, Twitter is a hassle.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elsa, for the presentation. I'm actually a fan of sci-fi, and I haven't read your book, but I'll be sure to look it up. My question goes in this way. Now, we all know that things like this, when you come to, NFC, near-field chips and all of that, and clouding and internet and all of this advancements when they come in, what people are actually really afraid of is the cybersecurity aspect of it. Two things people are usually scared of: the cybersecurity and then the ethics. So, when things like this come in chip, it means it could be hacked. We're trying to project an enhanced life for humans, and what if the enhancement could actually be turned back the other way around? I don't mean to be negative, or maybe I'm not ready to get a chip in my hand. But then, to what extent can you say we can push the ethics so that everything will be respected, the boundaries will be well set, and then do you really think that we're actually ready for this? With the level of other things happening, I really appreciate this lecture because it teaches a lot. But then we have to look at this other side, right? What do you think we can do to push in the ethics, right, to enhance this and not actually threaten the humanity that we're actually speaking about?
Yeah, again, excellent question. Also a really big question. I want to challenge one part of that. So I'm going to say it's the other way around. It's not we controlling all the technology surrounding us. It's the opposite way, right? So Facebook have the best psychologists and experts on humanity, paradoxically, to make us addicted. There's just a term in software called stickiness, right? You want to hit those dopamine loops. You have these red notifications. You're developing an app, and you want the user of that app to return to it, get addicted all the time, check back, check back, check back. And the same is true for everyday things. Like if you have Amazon search or the Kindle store, the algorithms, they adopt to you and present you with the reality that they think you're most likely to do what? To click, to buy, to share, right? So yes, we are manipulating technology with our bodies, but it's a bit more complicated because algorithms already control our daily lives as well. And I may have missed part of the middle of the question, but again, the boundaries. I think the question was, when we become more and more technology, does our humanity end? Where does our humanity end? And how digital do we even want to become in the age of machines? So I think I don't have the perfect answer. I think maybe it has to do with intention. So again, there's often a misunderstanding. So a friend of mine, Moon Ribas, whom I met in Sweden, she's a cyborg as well. And we think implants and modern technology sometimes takes us away from nature, takes us away from our humanity. But she uses the technology to sense earthquakes happening around the earth. I think it's beautiful. And she's an artist. She does these artistic impressions with musical instruments, and each time she senses a vibration in her leg, she plays an instrument, and it's like a dance, a musical interpretation of the breathing and living of the earth. So I think technology in some ways can actually bring us closer to earth. So I'm sorry, that's probably not the answer you were looking for, because I don't have one. I think the frontiers are completely meshed. It's really hard to know. I think as long as you're free and you can enhance your human qualities, imagination, creativity, curiosity, with or without tech, I think you're good to go.
I think we're running out of time, many people, but Elsa is going to be around so you can ask her questions, but we could actually finish this by checking her hidden talent. Okay?
Thanks very much for coming.